And for more on this, we're joined by Shabnam Hamid from the Gendered Violence Research Network at the University of New South Wales. Shabnam, welcome to The Drum.
Hi.
Rosie Batty has spoken about this incredibly extensively, how family violence leave would have really helped in the year leading up to Luke's murder. Tell us from your experience in what ways this kind of leave does help women.
It helps women to stay in employment without leave to access courts, police, other accommodation, counselling. It can put their employment at risk. If you're in a crisis situation and you can't make those appointments, you can't leave violence. The leave and other supports for family violence also help co-workers and the organisations because they're able employers that have brought in these supports are able to support to ensure that the organisation is safe, to increase their productivity and to reduce their costs.
Now, this is being brought into the public sector in Victoria, but there's a lot of unions going into the private sector. I know that Telstra, NAB and Kmart already have family violence leave. What about small businesses, though? What do you say to people who say it will be too much of a cost impost for them?
A lot of small businesses have the most innovative approaches when it comes to supporting their employees who are victims of family violence. Firstly, small businesses usually know their employees very well and have a real desire to help them. Supporting employees who are victims of family violence is not just about leave. One example I'll give you is an example of a pharmacy. One of their staff members who worked at the checkout was being harassed. They moved the checkout closer to the pharmacy desk. This stopped the person harassing them because they would have to do it in front of a witness. Small businesses have time and time again helped people who are suffering family violence.
How difficult would it be for women to prove that they're suffering from family violence to an employer?
Our experience has been that evidentiary requirements hasn't been a great hurdle in terms of implementing the leave. Basically, employers know their employees and most often know what's going on. In terms of what's actually in the provisions for family violence, there's a number of different mechanisms that that you can show that you've been affected by family violence, whether it's doctors, counselling services, court documents, police, statutory declarations. We haven't found that an issue in terms of implementation.
Are there privacy concerns, though, if a colleague or the HR department or a manager tells someone else that this woman is suffering from this?
In terms of how we talk to employers about privacy, is that when you talk to an employee that's accessing the leave, that you can't guarantee their privacy full stop, because employers have a duty of care. So if I were to have a conversation with an employee who's seeking the leave, we'll try and protect your privacy where it is possible to do so. If a threat is made against the workplace, the employers have a duty of care to inform the police, to inform security and do whatever else is necessary to protect the employee and the workplace.
Do you think this is a kind of step as well in sort of taking away some of the stigma attached to people who have suffered domestic violence? Do you think that is actually going to, help the community talk about it more, accept it more, so that those privacy issues may not actually be as great for people who might be putting their hands up for this leave?
Absolutely. I think the more employers, the more businesses that and governments that come on board with family violence, the more the clear signal is sent through the wider community that family violence is not acceptable and that supports are available. What I would compare it to is sexual harassment laws. 20 or 30 years ago, sexual harassment was rife, but I think if you look at the situation now, most people would say that sexual harassment in the workplace is unacceptable.
Do you know of any cases where this has gone badly, though, for somebody applying for domestic violence leave, where they've had that rejected or where they've maybe felt as though the workplace hasn't dealt with it very sensitively?
What we say at the University of New South Wales is that pulling a policy off the internet and applying it is probably the worst way to go. Employers, organisations really need to have a think about how it fits their workplace and how they're actually going to implement it, whether it's training their staff so that our staff respond well to disclosure, talking to knowing who to refer people to, looking at how their policy is going, doing some monitoring and evaluation and making sure that it's working as well as it could. Implementation is really important. The businesses that we deal with, we provide research and advisory and training services to make sure that the policy is implemented well.
Shabnam, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry's Chief Executive Kate Carnell has made some interesting comments about this. She says it could have unintended consequences, and I quote, "We don't want to do anything that impacts upon workplaces' interest in employing or progressing women." Is there any validity in that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the one part that's valid is all policies can have unintended consequences, and implementation is key. I think the Victorian government's announcement is a great first step, but what's going to be really important is how it's implemented, how a top-level statement can have reach through the state, and how through the state everyone can stay on message.
Just briefly, can you see this being rolled out through all workplaces?
Absolutely. The first supports that were introduced were in about 2010. Now over 1.6 million workers are covered through enterprise bargaining, through awards, and also through policies, etc.